You're watching a Highwire Media podcast.
Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps show. I'm your host, as always, Larry Elise. On today's episode of Beyond Borders, we dive into the Great Train Robbery. Before we do that, let me know your thoughts, as always, in the comment section below. Keep the conversation going. And of course, if you want to follow us on social media, all the links will be in the description. And with that, let's dive right in. 1963 was a defining year in British cultural and social history. It marked the rise of mod culture, miniskirts, and the scandalous downfall of government officials. At the same time, the Beatles were beginning their meteoric rise to global fame, capturing the world's attention. While the mainstream world embraced music and fashion, London's underworld was alive with crime. Infamous criminal figures were making their mark. The Crave twins dominated the East End, while smaller gangs operated elsewhere, carrying out violent and bold heists. Armed robberies and payroll thefts were becoming routine. In fact, bank robberies were so frequent that one could scarcely get through a Thursday morning without news of another hit. But not all criminals relied on brute force and violence. A new breed of thief was emerging, one marked by cunning, charm, and sophistication. Among them was a man known for his meticulous approach to theft and for surrounding himself with similarly refined associates. These individuals were more likely to wear tailored Savile Row suits and drive elegant cars, Jaguars, Bentleys, and the like, than wheeled weapons. For a time, this refined thief focused on stylish, smaller-scale crimes. These included mingling with wealthy vacationers in places like the south of France, learning their routines, and then orchestrating high-value burglaries. His ability to identify lucrative opportunities and execute thefts with precision earned him a reputation as an exceptionally astute criminal. Despite being in his early 30s, this man had already spent a decade behind bars. Yet prison proved to be more of an education than a deterrent. It offered access to a network of seasoned fraudsters, safecrackers, and master criminals who passed on their knowledge and expertise. During this era, many crimes were executed with finesse and careful planning. Risks were calculated rather than taken recklessly. But younger criminals, eager to make their mark, often embraced the bolder opportunities their mentors would avoid. The ambition to be recognized as one of the elite in the criminal world meant doing the jobs others wouldn't dare attempt. Such an opportunity came on November 27, 1962. A payroll shipment at London Airport was targeted and successfully robbed, yielding £62,000, a substantial amount at the time. Yet for those involved, this was only the beginning. They set their sights on a far greater prize. Not long after the successful payroll heist at the airport, news of another potential job began circulating. Within criminal circles, such opportunities were referred to as a tickle, a tip-off about a lucrative target. This new lead involved intelligence provided by a solicitor who, in exchange for a share of the profits, had passed along insider knowledge. According to the information, vast sums of money were being transported regularly via a Royal Mail train running from Glasgow to London. The figures being discussed ranged from £1 to £6 million, staggering amounts by any standard, and unimaginable even to some of the most successful teams operating in London. This was more than just another job. It represented the ultimate challenge, and the kind of payout that could change lives forever. To take on a robbery of this magnitude, a specialized team needed to be assembled. The group that came together was as diverse as it was talented. Some members were known for their charm and influence in London's criminal underground, while others brought specific technical or physical skills. One was particularly popular with women, another was highly skilled getaway driver with the talent to have made a career in professional motor racing. As a collective, this group stood out even among the city's seasoned criminal ranks. In the early planning stages, the gang began scouting the route of the mail train, making several reconnaissance trips up and down the line. Their goal was to find a location that offered both access and seclusion. Eventually, they discovered an ideal location just beyond a stretch of railway, a quiet rural area with open fields and back roads. This spot, known as Bridgeoe Bridge, was approximately 50 miles outside of London and offered exactly the cover and layout they needed. It became clear that the core team wouldn't be enough to carry out the plan alone. Additional support would be required, particularly from individuals experienced in stopping trains. Another group from southeast London was brought in for their expertise in rail-related operations. Among their number was someone who specialized in signal manipulation and train stopping tactics. Altogether, 16 men were eventually recruited for the heist. Several were tasked with lifting the heavy cash-filled mailbags that would need to be removed from the train quickly and efficiently. Given the scale of the operation, security and secrecy were paramount. Communications were conducted in code, and meetings were held in secluded or public locations under the guise of unrelated activity. In one instance, the gang would gather at a park playing football to avoid suspicion while holding strategy discussions under the cover of game time huddles. One of the key technical contributions to the plan involved the creation of a fake railway sign. A bogus red light would be set up to bring the train to a stop. The logic was simple. A red light meant danger, and any driver would be obligated to halt the train immediately upon seeing it. Inside information had confirmed that the money was located in the first two carriages of the train, directly behind the engine. The plan was to detach these sections and drive them a mile down the track to Bridgeoe Bridge. This maneuver would allow the team to avoid any interference from the numerous postal workers stationed further back in the train who were sorting mail during transit. Once at the bridge, the money can be transferred quickly into waiting vehicles. There was, however, a critical problem. While the team had learned how to manually uncouple train carriages, there was no guarantee the train driver would cooperate with demands to move the engine forward. The risk that the driver might refuse or resist required a contingency plan. The group discussed the possibility of forcing the driver to comply, but this posed serious risks. Some individuals could be threatened into submission, while others might resist regardless. To ensure the operation could proceed without relying on the train crew, the gang decided to enlist an additional member, someone with knowledge of locomotive controls. Through existing criminal connections, the group identified a man who knew a train driver. This acquaintance agreed to help recruit the driver, who would be on standby in case the actual engineer could not or would not move the train. With this last piece in place, the plan was ready. The team now had the location, the tools, the vehicles, the intelligence, and the manpower required to pull off what would soon become the most audacious robbery of the 20th century. By August 1963, preparations for the robbery were complete. The gang had purchased Leatherslade Farm, a secluded property located about 17 miles from Bridgeoe Bridge. This remote farmhouse would serve as their operational base and hideout both before and after the heist. In the final days leading up to the robbery, several members of the gang stayed at the farm, reviewing every detail of the plan. To maintain their cover, they disguised themselves as an army unit. The two Land Rovers and a truck were repainted to resemble military vehicles, providing a plausible explanation for their presence and movement in the area. Shortly after midnight, on August 8th, the team loaded their gear into the vehicles and set off for the bridge. Meanwhile, the Royal Mail train was making its scheduled stop at Crewe, one of the final stations, before its journey toward London resumed. Back at the bridge, the gang assumed their positions. With everything in place, the risk of failure loomed large. Success would bring them unimaginable wealth. Failure would likely lead to long prison sentences. As the vehicles were parked discreetly at the base of the bridge, several members spread out to monitor the area. Communication lines were cut to prevent calls from going out, ensuring a 30-minute head start in the event of trouble. Once all preparations were finalized, the 16 men took up their positions and waited. Shortly after 3 a.m., the sound of the approaching train echoed through the countryside. The vehicle, brightly lit from within due to workers sorting mail, was clearly visible as it neared the bridge. The sight was electrifying, the culmination of months of planning, now moments away from execution. At the right moment, a fake red signal was activated. As expected, the driver spotted the light and brought the train to a halt. What followed was a coordinated, precise assault. Several gang members moved in swiftly and silently, overwhelming the train crew and taking control of the front section of the train. The engine, along with the first two carriages where the money was stored, was successfully uncoupled from the rest of the train. The gang intended to drive this portion down the track to the bridge, but an unforeseen issue arose. The substitute driver who had been brought along proved unfamiliar with the modern controls of the train. His inability to operate the locomotive caused panic, and he was ultimately removed from the cab. With time running out, the original driver, who originally resisted, was forced back into the cabin and compelled to move the train forward. Once the train reached the designated spot of the bridge, the next phase began. The mailbags, each weighing approximately 40 pounds, were removed from the carriages and passed down in a passed down an embankment in a human chain. Postal workers on board were ordered to lie on the ground as the gang efficiently transferred the bags into the waiting vehicles below. Timing was crucial. After 30 minutes, the prearranged limit for the operation, the job was called off. All mailbags were loaded and the vehicles departed under the cover of darkness. By 3:45 a.m., the gang had completed the job with near military precision. In just half an hour, they had stolen 120 mailbags filled with cash. As they drove back to the farmhouse, spirits were high. In fact, in the back of one lorry, several of the men sang, "It's the good life." Their timing was eerily perfect. Just as they pulled into the farmyard, a radio bulletin reported that the train had been stopped and robbed. By 4 a.m., all 16 men had returned safely to the farm. They brought with them the spoils of the heist, millions of pounds in stolen cash. Later that morning, the process of counting and dividing the money began. Each man would receive a cut, approximately 150,000 pounds, an extraordinary sum in 1963. Originally, the plan had been to lay low at the farmhouse for a couple of weeks before dispersing. However, concerns quickly mounted that police would soon cast a wide net in the area. Fearing discovery, the gang decided to abandon the hideout just 1 day after the robbery. Before leaving, they took meticulous steps to eliminate evidence. Gloves had been worn at all times to avoid leaving fingerprints. Every surface was wiped down repeatedly by multiple people to ensure no traces were left behind. Despite these precautions, one serious problem remained: the mailbags themselves. As physical evidence directly tying the gang to the crime, they needed to be destroyed. The plan was for someone to return to the farmhouse days later to dispose of them. That plan was never carried out. Within hours of the robbery, local police from Buckinghamshire arrived at the scene near the bridge. They meticulously inspected the Royal Mail train for any clues that could lead to those responsible. But the scale and complexity of the crime quickly proved too great for a local investigation. Scotland Yard was brought in to take over the case. With 2.5 million missing and a railway employee seriously injured, the case was immediately treated as one of national importance. The investigation was assigned to the Flying Squad, a specialized division of detectives known for handling the country's most serious crimes, ranging from counterfeiting to violent robberies. The media erupted with coverage. Newspapers splashed headlines across their front pages, and the public followed the story closely. A reward of 250,000 pounds was offered, fueling a frenzy of tips and speculation. The audacity of the crime captivated the imagination of the nation. It seemed like something out of a Western film. Criminals stopping a train in the middle of the night, overpowering its crew, and vanishing with a fortune. The scale of the robbery and the boldness which would have been executed stunned the public. While train robberies had once existed in tales of the Wild West, nothing of this magnitude had ever been attempted in modern Britain. The fact that such a large amount of money was taken added to the mystique. In 1963, 2.5 million pounds was an astonishing figure. In today's terms, it would equate to tens of millions. The media coverage was constant, with reporters closely trailing police efforts, speculating on who was responsible and where they might be hiding. The pressure on the investigators was immense, and nowhere was it felt more than within the Flying Squad. The head of the team refused to let the case go cold. He worked relentlessly, motivating his officers with a sense of urgency and determination. Long days and nights became routine as the manhunt expanded the country. A breakthrough came just days after the robbery. On Monday, August 12th, a local herdsman noticed suspicious vehicles parked near Leather Slade Farm, the rural property the gang had used as a hideout. He alerted police, and by the next morning, the farmhouse was swarming with detectives and forensic experts. Forensic investigators were given strict instructions to go over the property inch by inch. The search yielded more than anyone expected. Despite the gang's effort to clean the premises, they had left behind critical evidence. The discovery included burned remnants of ski masks, partially destroyed mailbags, abandoned vehicles, and most significantly, numerous fingerprints. Items as innocuous as a ketchup bottle and a Monopoly board game provided forensic gold. The investigation team began matching prints to known criminal records. The results were swift. One by one, prints came back, linking the farmhouse to specific individuals. As the connections were made, a list of suspects grew rapidly. Names tied to major London crime networks emerged, including several men who had long been suspected of high-level robberies. By the following morning, photographs and names of the wanted men were published in newspapers across the country. At the same time, the first arrests were made. 2 members of the gang, including the man responsible for setting up the fake railway signal, were captured in Bournemouth. Their downfall came after they attempted to pay 3 months' rent for a garage in cash, an unusual act that raised suspicion. With each new arrest, the public's interest grew. The case became Britain's first true media crime, an ongoing saga that played out on television screens and newspapers, blending criminal drama with national intrigue. The investigation continued at full speed. Detectives worked tirelessly, conducting interviews, executing raids, and chasing down leads. By December of that year, all but 3 members of the gang had been captured. Yet the majority of the stolen money, more than £2 million, remained unrecovered. The Great Train Robbery quickly transformed from a single event into a national obsession. The story unfolded like a serialized drama, with fugitives on the run, dramatic courtroom scenes, and daring prison escapes still to come. The trial for those captured in connection with the Great Train Robbery began on January 20th, 1964, at Aylesbury. The proceedings would stretch on for more than 51 days, one of the longest criminal trials in British history. The courtroom was filled with intense interest, both from the public and the media. Among the most emotional moments came during the testimony from the train driver, who had been struck on the head during the robbery and was left with lasting injuries. Ultimately, all but one of the defendants were found guilty. The sentences handed down shocked the country. 12 of the robberies received a combined total of 307 years in prison, with most individuals being sentenced to between 25 and 30 years. These were some of the harshest sentences ever handed down for a robbery in the UK, and they sent a clear message. The judge firmly rejected any notion of glamour associated with the crime, describing it as a violent and greedy act that deserved no leniency. The courtroom reacted with disbelief at the severity of the punishments. In a time when such long sentences were typically reserved for terrorists or murders, many were stunned that a robbery, even one as large and audacious as this, resulted in such extraordinary penalties. Despite the success in court, the case remained incomplete. 3 key participants, Bruce Reynolds, Buster Edwards, and James White, had managed to evade capture, and of the $2.5 million stolen, only a small fraction had been recovered. The rest had seemingly vanished, along with the fugitives. The pursuit of the remaining robbers became a priority, with massive rewards on offer and the public fascinated by the story. The manhunt continued with relentless intensity. The ongoing chase turned the crime into a kind of national serial drama, with each arrest and new lead making front-page news. For one of the fugitives, life on the run was becoming increasingly difficult. With his photo plastered across newspapers and broadcasts on television, finding safe places to hide was becoming nearly impossible. Even close friends and allies were weary of offering help, knowing that anyone seen assisting the fugitives risked arrest or worse. Police expanded their efforts nationwide, following up hundreds of tips and sightings. Detectives played a game of cat and mouse with the mastermind, coming close on several occasions. In one instance, officers arrived at a suspected hideout only to find it empty. Evidence suggested the fugitive had left moments before their arrival. A pot of tea, still warm on the stove, and teacups sat out on the table. In July 1964, the case took a dramatic turn when one of the convicted robbers, Ronnie Biggs, escaped from Wandsworth Prison. Using a rope ladder made by hand, Biggs and 3 other prisoners scaled the wall and jumped into a waiting furniture van. From there, he fled to Paris, where he underwent plastic surgery and then moved on to Australia. Just weeks later, another convicted man, Charlie Wilson, managed his own escape and disappeared into Canada. The already sensational story grew even more complex. With fugitives now scattered across the globe and law enforcement facing international boundaries, the investigation became increasingly difficult. Meanwhile, Bruce Reynolds, still evading capture, also chose to leave the country. With police closing in, he made his way to France and eventually to Mexico. There, he was joined by his wife and young son. Using the proceeds of the robbery, the family adapted quickly to life abroad, enjoying luxury accommodations and a comfortable lifestyle. Despite being a fugitive, life in Mexico offered a sense of freedom. The family assumed new identities and traveled frequently. For the child, life on the run felt like a game, complete with secret names and elaborate instructions. Over time, others began to lose interest in the fugitive lifestyle. Buster Edwards, who had escaped to Mexico with his family, decided to turn himself in by September 1966. In exchange for his surrender, he received a reduced sentence of 15 years. The previous year, James White had been tracked down and captured. With these arrests, only 3 major figures from the robbery remained at large: Reynolds, Wilson, and Biggs. Strikingly, much of the public viewed the robbers with sympathy. To many, these men seemed like modern-day folk heroes, bold and rebellious individuals who had outwitted the system and struck a blow against authority. While law enforcement pursued them doggedly, public opinion often leaned in favor of the outlaws. Even casual observers voiced support, expressing hope that the fugitives might remain free. The robbery, in the eyes of many, had taken on a mythic quality, more an act of daring than criminality. Despite this romanticism, the investigation remained focused and tireless. For the detectives involved, particularly the lead investigator, the case had become a personal mission. Retirement was postponed, holidays were ignored, and no resource was spared in the pursuit of justice. Eventually, the search for one of the remaining robbers would lead to Canada. As tips rolled in, one finally paid off. Police discovered Charlie Wilson's location and moved swiftly to arrest him. The case's lead detective even traveled personally to witness the arrest, determined to see the mission through to the end. After nearly 6 years on the run, the mastermind of the Great Train Robbery made the decision to return to England. Life as a fugitive had become increasingly unsustainable. Funds were running low, and the former luxury of life abroad, penthouse suites, tropical weather, and a sense of detachment from consequence had faded. With the hopes of organizing another large-scale job, one said to rival or even exceed the train robbery in value, the decision was made to risk a return. However, the welcome home was far from quiet. Within weeks of arriving back in the country, he was arrested. His young son was told only that his father had done something wrong in the past. The reality of years spent on the run came crashing down in an instant. The man who had once lived like royalty abroad was now headed for prison. In January 1969, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy and robbery. The court sentenced him to 25 years in prison, closing the final chapter in the Great Train Robbery's original plot. The manhunt that had consumed the attention of law enforcement and the public for most of the decade had finally come to a close. Almost. One key figure remained at large. The final fugitive had taken refuge in Brazil. Having moved from Australia to Rio de Janeiro, he settled in a country that did not have an extradition treaty with the United Kingdom. This technicality allowed him to live openly while remaining beyond the reach of British authorities. Over the years, several attempts, both official and unofficial, were made to bring him back to the UK. Some involved legal action, others took the form of vigilante-style capture plots. None succeeded. The legal system in Brazil offered him protection, and so he remained. Despite the passage of time, his story continued to draw public interest. For a fee, visitors from around the world could meet him and hear his account of the robbery. As years passed, his health began to deteriorate, including suffering a stroke, but his infamy never faded. Meanwhile, the mastermind of the crime was eventually released on parole after serving just 9 years. Upon his release in 1978, he quietly re-entered public life. In 1993, he and the final fugitive were reunited for the first time in decades. Later that same year, he published his memoir, offering an insider's account of the crime and his criminal career. His reflections focused not only on the planning and execution of the robbery, but also on his transformation from a law-abiding youth into one of Britain's most wanted men. Remarkably, his son held no resentment over the past. In fact, he expressed admiration for what his father had done, not for the crime itself, but for the way he had lived life on his own terms, and ultimately accepted the consequences. Now, in his later years, the man who had once orchestrated Britain's most dangerous and most daring theft lived quietly. But one question continued to follow him everywhere. Would he do it again? And his answer was thoughtful. With age, experience, and the passage of time, the practicalities and consequences had changed. But under the same circumstances, youth, ambition, and opportunity, he acknowledged he would likely have made the same choice. And so the story of the Great Train Robbery came to rest. Part crime, part folklore, and wholly unforgettable. And that is our case for Beyond Borders this week. Join us next week for our finale of Beyond Borders. And of course, now we'd like to thank our sponsor, NordVPN, the only VPN I trust to keep me safe, whether I'm working, researching, or streaming on the go. Let's be real, we're living in a digital world that feels a little more like the Wild West every day. Your data, it's gold. And there are always people out there trying to snatch it up. Whether it's hackers, sketchy websites, or even your own internet provider. That's where NordVPN comes in. With just one click, NordVPN encrypts your internet traffic and hides your IP address, which means no one can see what you're doing online. Not your ISP, not advertisers, not even that creepy guy in the coffee shop who looks a little too interested in your laptop. And here's the best part. It's fast. Like we're talking really fast. NordVPN has thousands of servers across the globe. So whether you're watching Netflix from Japan or trying to grab early access to a new game, you'll never feel like you're back on dial-up. It works on all your devices too. Your phone, laptop, tablet, even your smart TV. One account covers up to 6 devices, so you're protected everywhere. Right now, NordVPN is hooking up my viewers and listeners with an exclusive detail. Use the link in the description today. Get a huge discount today, plus 4 extra months for free. Your NordVPN, your gateway to safer, faster internet. And with that, give us a thumbs up if you like our video. Hit the subscribe button down below. Hit the bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And of course, if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS or hit the scan the QR code right here. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you in our next episode.